Hello. Are you muted?
I'm not now. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. I have not met you yet, so it's nice
I
to meet
know. It's
you.
so nice to meet you.
Like somebody should probably represent Russ since he never gets on this stuff.
Somebody needs to. That guy needs some help.
I'm working on it. Reining
I,
him in best I
you're
can.
doing good. You're doing really good for him, Tara. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. You
Yeah.
guys have been a huge help to
Well,
me.
good.
I appreciate it.
Well, today we're going to do listing forms, which aren't necessarily your commercial forms, but it'll kind of give an overview of
Okay.
kind of what we're going to do. And if you have any questions, feel free. This will probably be a small group. Oh, well, everybody's showing up now. Hi, Corey. She's all muted out.
I'm so excited to learn from you today. I am excited for this. No, I always love your forms classes so much, but the listing agreement, I have like no anecdotes or no like stories for like, this is why this is important and this is
Oh,
why
good.
this is important. So like for me is like, I feel like I'll have a better understanding, be able to explain the pieces better.
Good. Oh, I love stories.
I'm so excited. Yeah.
It's story time, kids. Get your milk and cookies out. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hello.
Glad you made it.
Thank you.
Kayla's here. She's all quiet.
Hi.
Hi. So perfect. And let me get into my forms really quick. I'm going to leave you guys here. So is everybody using zip form?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause that's what I'm going to log into here, just as kind of a guideline for the forms. And we will just get through this. Is somebody recording this?
Yes, Brittany is.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to get in here and share my screen with you guys so we can kind of start. Give me just a second. I'm getting better at this share screen stuff.
I'm going to be on mute most of the time, and I may turn my video off because my husband's literally making pancakes like a few feet away from me. 20 square feet. And so I have my dog and my husband making pancakes like literally within like 2 feet of me. So
No worries. My dogs will probably be barking because my pool guys are supposed to be showing up here shortly. So, okay. So, let's see if I can get in here. Okay. Can you guys all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully most of you are using zip forms. And if you are, I'm praying that you're using templates. And if you're not and you have any questions about templates, let me know because they are a lifesaver. So let's just start. I'm going to start just like I'm doing a new listing transaction. And we're just going to call this one practice. And we're going to work on residential forms. Now, you know, if it's been listed in the past, you can click on this MLS Connect, right? And you can actually look it up in Flex and it will pull some of the information in from Flex. The only problem is it pulls in like the old listing agent information and stuff. So sometimes I use that, sometimes I don't. But I have my templates. You'll love my templates. I have my listing from 2019 packet, which has not changed. So I always use that for my listings. Okay, so let's get into our documents. So yes, there is a rhyme and a reason, and I'm actually really glad Corey asked to do this because I've been noticing a lot of us are getting a little slacker on our listing agreements. And I think the first thing that I want to remind everybody is when you fill out this form and you have your client sign it, that's a legal agreement. So if you're leaving a bunch of things off of there and you're like, I'm just going to fill them in when I get into Flex, the seller did not sign or agree to what you're adding to the contract, right? It's no different than a sales agreement. So please try to fill out as much information on here as you can, because this is what your seller's agreeing to. And I know since we've been putting our own stuff into Flex as far as comments, directions, private remarks, a lot of times we just leave them blank. 95% of the people leave them blank and then just go in and type them in. But I really highly suggest that you put everything on this form, because again, that's what your seller's agreeing to. And so it is a binding contract. So going through the very basics, the first thing is the file cross-listed. Is it a house with 10 acres or more that you could list it as a residence or a ranch? Because a ranch listing is a house with 10 or more acres. Is it a house that's zoned commercial? So it could be used for commercial, but it could also be used as a residence. That's what cross-listing is, okay? Obviously the listing member, if you have a co-listing member, the area, I do not know where to access that map anymore that has the association areas. Does anybody know where that is?
I have no idea where it is. I have a copy in the coaching drive, the coaching share drive for people to look at that I got from Lisa, but I don't know where we ever found it.
Well, you know, they used to, just before we had the internet, you know, we had everything in paper form. So I'm going to see if I can request another area map. The other thing is just to go into Flex and find a listing that's right in the neighborhood and find out what the area was. But we got to have that with the sub area, obviously. And the house, the street name, avenue, city, state, zip, really super important. I listed a property and all my information was correct in the listing, but the selling agent decided to misspell the street name and put the wrong zip code on it. And I caught the street name right when the offer came through, but of course I was out of town and I thought, well, we'll just correct that. But here we are now. The CD's been sent out and the buyer signed it and the zip code's wrong. And so that's going to potentially delay us 3 more days. So just really important that you get the accurate information on here, and just, you know, hopefully whoever's writing the offer does as well. The begin date and the end date, obviously, however long the listing term is for your contract, and the list price you're agreeing on. And what's the subtype? Is it a manufactured home? Is it a home? Is it a condo? Is it in a park? That's really important. So anything with an asterisk in here, you guys, has to be filled out. But really, technically, I would suggest filling out as much as you possibly can. So is there a seller's disclosure? 99% of the time, there is a seller's disclosure. If for some reason there's not one, I still suggest having your buyer sign a blank disclosure with the address on it and signing on the last page that says they're waiving the right to receive one. Even if it's an estate or a foreclosure, I just feel like that could come back and get you in a court of law. So if you have yourself covered on that, that's a super smart thing. The agreement type, the exclusive right to sell, and the exclusive agency. Back in the day, a seller could list their house with several people. They didn't have an exclusive right to sell. They could just say, okay, whoever sells our house gets the commission. We don't really do that anymore. So 100% of the time, you're going to say you're exclusively going to sell their property, and you're the only one that has the right to represent the seller. And the protection period, if you have the house listed for a month and they pull it off the market, and someone you showed it to knocked on their door 3 days later and said, hey, I saw you removed your listing. I'd like to go ahead and purchase your property. If they saw it while it was listed, if an agent was the procuring cause of them seeing this property, then that agent still would be allowed or deserve to receive a commission. So that protection period is a long time. You can cut it. I usually do 165 days, because I feel like if they pull it off the market and want to sell it to somebody that wants to wait for 6 months, I'm not going to go after them for a commission, but the protection period on the listing agreement, I think, is just standard 365, I believe.
Do you mind if
So,
Tammy?
yeah, please.
So the reason I want to pipe in is just that's why you should always write down and track all of your ad calls, all of your open house visitors, everything like that. You need to get the names and you need to keep track of all of that because that's how you know if somebody's violating the protection period. You're able to see, oh yeah, they called me on an ad call and I showed them the home. See, I have the record of it. If you do not keep a record of that, there's nothing you can do damn well anyway. You might as well put 0 in there because
That's
there's nothing.
right. That's super smart, Corey. Super smart. Because I've had this happen to me. I couldn't believe it. You know, my listing expired, and 2 days later, an agent showed up with an offer on the front door of the seller's steps.
I have a
But
buyer
showed
who
it.
just wanted me to do it. I have a buyer
Yeah.
who was like, hey, can we go put in a lower offer since now they don't have to pay their agent commission? I said no, because you'd still have to pay their agent. Their agent still would be owed a commission. And I would tell them.
Yep. I call this the sleazy clause. That's like really only sleazebags would try to pull this on you, but sadly, it has happened before. I've had it happen to me and I haven't fought it. I just let it go. But that protection period does protect you. Now, if you show the house to John Doe and the house expires 3 days later, a week later, they relist it with another agent and they show John Doe, you're not going to get that commission. That kind of invalidates it if they relist the property. I mean, you could always go out and say, oh, I'm procuring cause, but you're not guaranteed that you're going to receive a commission if they buy it when it's relisted with somebody else. Yeah. So that makes another point really important. When you have a listing and let's say that the client just says, I just want to keep my home. I've decided I'm not going to sell it. Can we remove our listing? So there's a couple things you can do. You can withdraw the listing. And let's say that the contract was good till December 31st. And they call you tomorrow and say, gosh, we just are going to stay put until next year. So if you withdraw the listing on a status change form, then you still have a contract with them. You take it off of Flex, you take it off the internet, but you still are tied into the terms of your contract until December 31st with them. So if you withdraw and then they want to relist with somebody else, they might have lied to you. And then a week later, you see the listing, you might see it come back up on the market, or you might get a call from another agent saying, oh, Bob and Mary Smith just called. They want to relist their property with me. They will ask you to do an expiration on the contract. So expire the listing out before that December 31st so they can relist the property. Because if they relist the property and they don't have that and they sell it, the seller would technically owe you a commission, even though you don't have the listing anymore, plus the new listing agent and the selling agent, because you're still under contract with the withdrawal. With an expiration, you just change that date and expire it out. You no longer have any communication with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I know it's kind of a lot, but it's important because if you do withdraw a listing, they'll 99% of the time somebody will get a hold of you and say, can you just expire it out? Because that usually means they want to do something else with it. So, and then we have the occupied by, who's occupying it. If it's rented, it's really nice to put that monthly rent in there because everybody's going to ask you, well, how much is it rented for? And on the excluded items, if they have something specific, we're taking 2 rose bushes, the chandelier in the dining room, and our gazebo. Just label them out right there so there's no misunderstanding. Obviously the owner's name, and in this market, we rarely put the owner's phone number in because we're scheduling appointments for them, right? So now the owner's phone number would pretty much be your number. And then if there's a second seller, same thing. Is it a short sale? Is the house in trouble? Are they going to have a short sale approved to sell, or is it a foreclosure? You see how I have my forms already pre-marked? this is part of my template because most of the time they're not short sales or foreclosures. So I keep certain things, already marked. And then total bedrooms, half baths, full baths. And a half bath is a toilet only, toilet sink, right? A full bath is now a shower and a toilet and a sink. Back in the day, if it didn't have a bathtub, it was a half bath. But now showers are considered 3/4, but we call them full baths. And then obviously you have to have square footage for each floor, which you can get from the county assessor. And then if it's a garage, is it attached? Is it detached? Is it a carport? The garage capacity and the year built. Is it new construction? And if it's not even been started yet, when is it going to start? And do you know who the builder is? So if you list a house that was built in, like I just listed one that was built in 2009, and I know who the builder was, so I could put the builder's name in there. That could be a benefit or a detriment if it's not a super high quality, well-known builder, but that helps.
Stay there.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, we don't want to tell anybody who built that house. What's the acreage size? The lot frontage and depth, I never fill these out, but you have to actually put a 0 in when you put these into Flex or it will not submit. So I always put 0 because I'm not going to go out and measure. Now, sometimes on the plat maps, they'll have a measurement and you can put those in there, but really as long as you have the acreage, we're good.
And Cami, I don't know if you know this, but I just found this out with my listing last week because mine was a regular, but it looked like a rectangle. So I sent it back to the title company and I asked them to give me the dimensions, and they actually sent it back with the dimensions on it. So even if they provide it without the dimensions, you can ask them to provide the dimensions.
I did not know that. And who is that, through First American?
Yeah, First American.
Wow.
I didn't know that either. I thought if it didn't have dimensions, it didn't have dimensions. And, I was just kind of screwed. And Lynette's like, oh, no, send it back and ask them for the dimensions. And they did it right.
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's
had no idea.
awesome. I had no idea. Wow. And from taking your real estate classes that if they give you the acreage, the lot is 12,000 square feet. You can just do the little tool online and convert from square feet to acreage. I do that all the time. If I have something weird, I can't remember. It's like how many square feet to an acre, 23,850.
That's what the calculators for.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But before the internet, we'd have to figure this out. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if it's a condo or if it's a mobile park, how much do they pay a month for fees? That's super important. And then possession. Most people right now are buying up, and so they're selling their property and they may need closing plus a few days afterwards to get their money and turn around and purchase another property. So these are all just heads up for the whoever's going to write the offer. But if it's closing and the seller needs 3 days, you can just write closing plus 3 days, or you can write in there closing. At closing, the day it closes at 9 p.m., the seller is obligated to hand the keys over. Most sellers are out of there by, early morning, midday, but that's where you can kind of negotiate a little bit. And then the IDX type, this is just for the internet, condo, manufactured home. And then if your seller wants to opt out of being on the internet, which we actually had people that did, that's why this came on here, but rarely do you want to not do that. That's not in your client's best interest at all. And then this is manufactured park. What's the make of the home? Is it I don't even know, Country Squire, whatever they are, whatever the brand is. And again, same thing, you could do the lot rent here. If it's in a subdevelopment or subdivision, and this has a star, so they want you to fill something in there, but not every place you have that for. And same thing with the school district, your taxes and your tax year. Is it a special tax designation? That's why it's really great to get a profile, because it will say right on there, if there's a widow or a senior and they're getting a discount, it's really important that you put that in there and make a note in the private remarks that those are reduced taxes, because as soon as a new buyer comes in and buys it, they will reassess the taxes. So they'll be quite higher. So super important to know if it's,
Open space is also very important. If you have an open
oh,
space tax designation, you need to make sure you disclose that, and you need to make sure your sellers know what that means,
yep.
because the open space can cost a lot of money at closing for the sellers. So
Yeah, and that's a story time because I didn't have a clue. And I had a friend that divided out 4 lots out in Moxie, and we were so excited. And we sold our first lot. And when he went to go sign the papers, he was using it for alfalfa. And so when we went to go close everything, he got his papers and it said, "Oh, this property is an open space and now it's residential." He had to pay almost $4,000 per $35,000 lot to pull them out of open space. So open space just means you pay minimal tax on the property because you're using it for an agricultural purpose, or it could just be that it's just empty land and there's nothing on it. So that's the best thing, Corey is right. Is it in open space? If it's land, if it's a house, it's probably not in open space, but land listings, you always want to check because that will cost the seller some money. Yeah. And then the parcel number, and then your title company of choice. Your public remarks, you know what you're going to say about the house. This is everything the public's going to see. You cannot put your name in the public remarks. You cannot put your phone number in the public remarks. You just have to be very generic. So no private information. Same thing with when you take a picture of your listing for MLS and the internet. You cannot have a picture of your real estate sign in there. If you do, you'll get a, well, they don't really violate fines right now, but they will tell you they'll take it down because you can't self-promote in the private or in public remarks or in your pictures. And I guess a real estate sign is self-promotion. So private remarks right now, super important to just put the guidelines for COVID again, just as a reminder. You're showing instructions. Maybe there's somebody in the house that has a compromised immune system, or they have dogs or an alarm system, or you had to put the key box on the tree behind the back fence, just anything that you only want the agents to see and not public. And again, this is why when we send listings out to people, our buyers, we don't send private listings. We always send public because there could be some information in the private remarks that buyers are not to see. And it could be phone numbers for sellers, could be agent phone numbers, but just make sure you do not send the private version of a listing out to clients. And then last is the directions, obviously, the commission, the co-op, or is it just a flat rate? And the variable. This is interesting. I don't ever mark anything on here, but Lynette pointed out, if you have a listing and you're willing to negotiate something, like I just paid $200 of my commission on my seller's behalf for a repair that needed to be done because it was kind of bogus. So I deducted $200 out of my commission. This technically should say yes. Like, we're flexible, we'll let you do something. I didn't do that in there. So I don't know how legality wise this would stand up, but I guess if you were, I don't know. What do you think, Corey?
wasn't to have a variable commission. So I mean, your intention wasn't to have a variable commission. I feel like it makes more sense if you're talking about like
Graduated.
will not pay commission on closing costs, or things like that. Won't pay an agent commission on closing costs, or if it goes below a certain amount, commission drops down or something like that. That would make more sense to me if it's intentional and planned. But like repairs and stuff like that, that's not intentional or planned. You don't know when it's going to happen until the deal's falling apart and the world's swarming around you.
Right. Well, and I saw one of our agents the other day had a listing that they put in, and in the private remarks, it said they're taking X amount % on the first 2 or 300 and then X amount on the next 100,000, they actually did graduate their commission down. And they do that in Seattle all the time. If they list $1 million house, you might get 2% on the first 500, and then you'll get 1% on, up to 800, and then 0.5% after that. So that would be variable as well.
It's
just
weird
don't use
that the
it.
terms aren't in here for that then. You would think that they would put terms in here for that, for you to actually fill out legally and have your seller sign saying like, hey, everybody knows that this is the case, you know?
You have to remember, these are Yakima forms. We have our own forms. So if you go to Northwest MLS, they do have something, I believe, on their form where you can break the commission out to different levels. But Yakima, we just don't do that much of this, right? So I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, so that's just something that we just don't deal a whole lot with. It's kind of interesting. And then do you guys understand all the different things back here? Do you want me to go over this? The input?
I don't think that's necessary. I do think though, up there, legal description.
Yeah.
Did you actually touch on that and why that's important? Because I've seen a lot lately where that has not been made available. So
The legal description? Wow. Yeah. So, an address is an address, but the legal description actually is the binding marks of where the property is. And I've seen some of back in the day when Shriner had their title company down by the Yakima Mall, I would go down there before they moved up to West Park. They have all the original books back to like early 1900s. They're huge books and they're handwritten legal descriptions. And the legal descriptions were, find the large rock, take 3 paces left, and take a right at the tree. I mean, these were the legal descriptions. Back then, they didn't really have addresses, right? I mean, the legal description is what we go by. So it's super duper important. Same thing with the parcel number. The parcel number actually trumps the address. So the parcel number is based off of the legal description. So we have to have legal descriptions. And I find it silly because it's not like most people know how to read a legal description. So we're providing these to our sellers and shoving it in front of their faces and saying, hey, initial this, when they don't even really know if it is their true legal description. But it is required by Department of Licensing, Washington law, national law, is that we don't just throw an address out there, because we could be selling the wrong property. And I have done that. I have sold the wrong property with the wrong parcel number. And I didn't know till it was a new construction. I didn't know till they were about ready to break ground. And it's like, why are you guys breaking ground 2 lots over? And it's because that's the lot that we wrote up. So super duper important to have that in your listing and to have both parties acknowledge that. Does that make sense?
Too. I mean,
Yeah.
I had one that had an address change in the middle of a transaction, and what keeps it together is making sure everybody knows we're going off the legal and the tax parcel, not off of the actual address. Because the address on the home was different, the address on the original contract was different, and then the address that it ended up being was different. So that there were 3 different addresses actually throughout the transaction. So you have to know the tax parcel.
Absolutely. The parcel number first and foremost, and the legal. I saw a listing that just came up the other day, and it said the directions: do not use the address to get there. Follow these directions exactly. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So when you put a new listing into Flex, it always pulls up that little map with the pinpoint, and it says, do you want to use this? And you have to acknowledge if that's where your property is located. And sometimes they're wrong. It's like, by the address or by the parcel, they give you just a wonky location. So just be aware. Yeah, you're better off. The parcel and then the legal description are the true boundaries and description of the properties.
Would you mind, that might be a good segue into supporting documents for a listing. Would you mind explaining what's an appropriate legal description to have in
Betcha.
your documents and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and what makes it legally binding.
Well, and I'll tell you, let's see, where am I at here? Um, Let me go to my listings. Yeah, and a lot of people don't include the legal, or they'll throw it in later from like a title report, and they're like, oh, here's the legal. But I send a lot of stuff back, and I tell people you need to have both parties initial it. And when you put your listing in, you cannot submit your listing without a legal description. And it's not just a legal description like printed off the assessor page. It says block 4, edition 6. That's incredibly abbreviated legal. You cannot use those. So I know that everybody, oh gee, this is like not the best example of legal because it's so light. But this is actually the statutory warranty deed that I got from the title company from the profile. And this is quite a long legal description. Some people try to type these out on the listing agreement. No way. Do you know how hard it is to type this and not make a mistake? So I would suggest never trying to type your own one up. You can cut and paste. I know that Lynette and Corey and Joanne, you guys from Berkshire, all do them differently. Corey, what's one of your addresses? Like maybe Boulder, is that one?
2 West Washington,
What is it?
7902. And this is one where I took a screenshot of the legal description from the property profile. And then one thing I wanted to point out here is you have to make sure it's labeled Exhibit A for it to be valid in your purchase and sale agreement.
Yeah, I know. And I've thought about this for a long time, Corey, because hardly anybody does that. But you're right.
But that's what it says in your purchase and sale agreement, attached as Exhibit A.
You're right. And this is a very appropriate form. And you guys just have a blank shell and you just upload it and fill it in, right?
Yep. I actually just screenshot it, so I don't even have to type it, because I could get something wrong if I type it, and I don't like that. So I actually screenshot it from the property profile and insert it as an image.
I love that.
So that way I'm taking exactly what they said. There is no room for transcription error or anything like that, because I'm likely to screw it up if I type it.
Right. Because this is actually a fairly short legal. You know, you saw mine, it's like huge. But this is great. And we actually probably should have this Exhibit A blank form somewhere.
I've got it.
Do you have it? I wonder if we could get Brittany to put it on.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Somewhere that we could access it, because this really is a super great way to do it.
Yep, it's the cleanest way that I found, because those statutory warranty deeds also can disclose things that you may not
It's true.
really feel as necessary to disclose. I mean, yes, the legal description's on there, but it's also going to tell you who had the original liens and like things like that.
It does give away a lot of information.
Yeah, so you might not necessarily always want that. So while it's still legal and valid and binding, especially you can just write Exhibit A at the top too, like
right.
Handwrite it
Across your deed, and you should. You're right. That's a good reminder for me too, because I don't always do that because I'm in such a hurry. But no, I think that's a great great point.
Me enough times that I have. Annie's good at scaring me into doing things.
Good. I do everything out of fear.
Yeah.
So obviously your listing contract, you know, your seller's name, and who do they grant? We're Keller Williams Yakima Valley, and actually even better is Yakima Valley Real Estate. K-Dub or just Keller Williams doesn't cut it, you guys, because there's a million Keller Williams offices. So make sure that you do get that Yakima Valley in there.
There's 2 even in our MLS. So
yeah, exactly. We don't want to get mixed up with them. So, you know, put your address in, your city. On here, I've had agents type the legal description. And it scares me because like you see, you know, 1/4, 3 1/4, block 29. There's so many potentials for errors. So I always just say see attached and add it there. Who's the agent that you're doing? Terms of the agreement, you understand. I think that the important things are, if you get an offer on your listing and it's expiring in a week, your listing will automatically extend with the purchase and sales agreement contract. But that being said, you really need to go in and change that, like in command or even into flex. You actually have the right to go in there because it will still expire out of flex. But if you have an offer, if it's expiring 10/31 and you have an offer that's closing 11/15, you can go in and change your date to 11/15 on your listing in flex, because otherwise it's going to drop off. It's going to expire out. And then when you want to go report it as sold, or if the sale falls, you have to go back in and re-input that whole listing again. So,
There's ones
legally.
I've seen lately that they never even get it marked sold and it still says expired even though I know it's sold.
Yeah, and what a shame. We need those records for the appraisers, right? We want to know when things have sold, and you want to get credit for it too. So, well, right here, if seller accepts an offer to sell during the term of this agreement, the agreement automatically continues through the closing date of the transaction or any authorized extension date of this listing. So it's already in here, so you're okay to do that. But do that, or else, like I said, it will drop off like it expired and you never sold it. And then this stuff, kind of important. I don't go through everything. I tell the clients that I am listing their property. They're giving me authority to put a sign in the yard, put a key box on, put pictures on the internet, advertise it. That part of it is pretty self-explanatory. But this one, listing firm, broker, shall not be responsible nor incur any liability for loss, vandalism, theft, or damage of any nature or kind whatsoever to the property and to any personal property. Guys, when I go over the contract with them, I tell them what I'm going to be doing. I tell them I cannot discriminate who we sell the house to. If we get a legitimate offer, but we don't discriminate who we sell it to, and that they need to hide, put away, out of sight, anything that could potentially be valuable to them. I just had a bottle of Vicodin disappear out of one of my listings. And I felt horrible because my lady is really sick and she's got major pain problems and her pills disappeared. And her doctor's like, uh-huh. But they did. And somebody took them because she had them hidden in the back of a cupboard. And so and I hate that, because how do you go back to somebody and say, oh my God, your client stole pills, or the agent stole pills? We've had that happen. So medications, guns, jewelry, money jars.
My husband just chimed in. When he worked for the PD here, Yakima Police Department, he actually got a call from a realtor here in town. I won't say who, but that a gun was stolen from one of their listings.
Oh my God,
So
that's scary.
Now it's on the street. Their licensed firearms on the street can potentially be being used in crimes, anything like that.
Well, and even if it's not something to that effect, I showed a property one day, and I was to a friend of mine, and I had her and her husband and her son, and he was young, and we're standing in the kitchen and we're talking, and all of a sudden we turn around and her son is holding onto this teapot. And my friend sees him and she goes, Jack, and he just goes like that, and it drops on the tile floor and it shattered. And I was like, oh my gosh, it looked really old. Horrified, right? So I had to clean it up. I had left a note. They were so upset. That was great grandma's 100-year-old teapot. I mean, they were devastated. I ended up writing a check. I'm like, I know this is not replaceable, but I gave them a couple $100 for it because I felt horrible. So I always tell my sellers, anything breakable, valuable, knickknacks, Hummels, anything that can be grabbed by a child or bumped into and knocked off or is of value, hide it. Just put it away. People should not be going through your drawers and your closets and all that. So
don't leave bills on the fridge. Don't leave
Yeah.
bills on the fridge.
Yep.
Anything private information, don't leave it on the fridge. It's amazing. I went and showed a property and they had past due notices hung up on the fridge.
Oh no.
I was like, well, I feel like they may be having money problems. We might have a little more negotiating power.
Thank you. That's a dead giveaway. So yeah, so just I always tell them, you know, put it away, out of sight, especially guns, yeah, and medications and money, jewelry, because it's horrible when stuff disappears and they call you and they go, "Oh my God, we had this on our counter and it's gone." I had a tour one day and it was my client and I went over this with them and I ran out that day and I don't even know why I did, but I was one of the first people there and there was a money clip sitting on the kitchen counter with hundreds of dollars just sitting on the kitchen counter. And I'm like, God, people, you didn't listen to me because
If
why
you
would you leave a
just
money
make
clip
money
there?
from brokers tours, I'm going to your brokers tours from now on.
Right. I'm like, that's tempting for anybody. I don't care who you are. So yeah, just be aware that have that conversation with them. That is the most important thing. Always verbalize because they're not going to probably read this contract. They just sign it, especially with as impersonal as we are with DocuSign right now. But I always go over that with them, you know, just be aware because we can't, what are you going to do? You can't prove that anybody did anything. So the listing date, the terms of the sale, the commission, you know, you always got to put your commission on there. And you, again, you know, not supposed to vary off of that unless, I guess, unless you come to terms in an agreement. Equal housing opportunity, seller represents that they have the right to sell the property. And here, seller agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless listing firm participants and agents against all claims, damages, losses, and expenses, right? Again, put all your stuff away. If something happens while I have your property listed, there's really nothing you can do. We have a protection clause right here, but by letting them know, they really appreciate that. Is the house a short sale? Are they having any distress? You know, is it going into foreclosure potentially? They need to be aware that, you know, that that's a disclosed item. And then they can opt out of being on the internet or the MLS, which is silly. But that's also what a listing service contractor agreement is. If you want to just have a private listing for a short period of time while they're getting ready to list the property, but I wouldn't have them mark this. I would just fill out the listing service agreement. And then the key box, they can have an attorney or an accountant review this offer or, you know, this listing agreement. Any attorney fees will be, you know, paid for whoever wins the, by whoever wins the court. Hopefully we don't ever have that. And that's kind of it for the listing agreement. But again, super important that you go over everything with them, have them sign everything, including this initial on the bottom of page 4. About half the contracts don't have it. But even though they are signing this page, you guys, they need to initial. Any questions on that? You guys are so good. Are you still there? I'm not even looking at you anymore.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so really quick, because I do have an 11:15 appointment, but so required forms that go with the listing agreement. So obviously we always have to have the data form and we have to have the listing contract. And those two forms have to be uploaded into Flex when you list a property. And it's under a little tab that says listing agreement. And you use that tab and it makes it private so that anybody getting into Flex cannot see those documents. You do not want to make those public, right?
I wish it said that when you were loading the documents in there because it makes it seem like you're just loading everything into the public. I wish it said this will be private or something next to it.
Yeah, it's so weird and it is deceiving, but yeah, you just have to put those in there and you have to have both of them. A lot of times people are uploading one but not the other. So this water disclosure is another Yakima written form that we just got not that long ago, or maybe a year ago. This really is not a required document, you guys. If you read it, it's basically for new construction on vacant land. But if you have a house in the city, if you have, you know, a house that's, I don't know, I say at your discretion, use this form. Okay, because this is like saying any purchaser in real property in Yakima County Code requiring potable drinking water is notified as of January 2018. All applicants for new construction building permits or other development permits provide evidence of adequate water supply. So that's kind of what this is for new construction. I do not I'm not opposed if it's my buyer and I'm selling a house out in Moxie. I'm not opposed to seeing if the seller will just fill out and say whether they have adequate water, because I had a listing and my well went dry and we closed the transaction and we had to put a new well in. So this could be good on a property where they may be having potential water problems as a disclosure, but technically it's only for new construction. Any questions on that?
None?
Okay, you guys are easy. So the next thing is probably the agency. So the agency disclosure, yes, this is covered in the listing. It does say also in the purchase and sales agreement who's representing who, but by law, we are supposed to provide a pamphlet. It's the Law of Real Estate pamphlet, and it's about, what, 8 pages long, Corey? Something like that. Most people don't provide that pamphlet, or if they do and didn't do an agency, they'd have the buyer or the seller initial page 1. They'd upload page 1 and to show proof that they had presented this. But to me, having page 1 initialed by somebody is not proof that you gave them the pamphlet. It's proof that you gave them page 1. And I think it's super important that the client understands who you're representing. I love this form because it states right here on my listing, I am representing the seller. You're getting a copy of the Law of Real Estate Agency pamphlet. Please sign here. And by doing that, they can't come back on you and say, oh, I didn't know what you were talking about. I didn't know you were representing me. I don't understand, and get taken to court because they misunderstood agency. They've just agreed right here that they received the information and they understand. So agency, go
I
ahead.
just point out for, especially because Jeff's on this call with us, he works with 2 teams, that it may look a little bit different when you see ours, because you may have multiple agency disclosure on some things, but not others. So for example, Lynette and I have multiple listings right now. We have one that's co-listed where we both represent the seller, and then we have one where only she represents the seller. So I am free to then represent the buyer in that transaction because I do not have agency with that seller. So you may see some where that is broken up a little bit in our office, especially with Cami and Kay, and then myself and Lynette. It may look a little bit different just transaction to transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's great, Corey, because when we do it, well, I'm the only one on the listings. So for me, I'm the listing agent on for the seller. But when we write an offer, if we're always on, well, Kay's not really on my offers, but I'm on every one of Kay's offers. And when she writes the offer, we put both of our names on here as we are representing who we're representing. So I like your multiple agency one. Joanne does that as well. I don't do it that way, but it's probably a good practice to do that. But again, any transaction I'm on that goes through our office, we have to have a consent to dual agency, because if I'm representing one party, I'm also representing Keller Williams. So I become a dual agent immediately because I'm representing on every single transaction that goes through our office. But if I'm actually the listing agent or the selling agent, now I'm dual. I have to actually represent somewhat. Keller Williams represents the buyer and the seller, right? Because I'm representing Keller Williams. So that's a little confusing. But if I'm on one of your transactions, just know that we need the dual agency form. And then the FERPTA, I love this. It's a silly form, and rarely are you gonna have anybody say that they are a non-resident alien, but I have had them happen before. So just for the sake that other agents are writing offers on your listings, if you get this listed with your property and you have them mark this, then the selling agent can fill that box in and say whether that agent, that seller is or is not a non-resident alien. And it takes the legality off of us just marking the box and assuming that the seller is not So this is a good form. Not everybody uses it, but I'm noticing, and same with the agency, I noticed that now John L. Scott uses the agency disclosure form, that form 42. That makes me happy because I got so much grief when I started using it. And then I stole this because Berkshire was using it. And now I get why they use it, right? It helps us fill out a more complete, accurate offer. And let's see, last but not least, obviously you got your lead-based paint. And if the house was built prior to 78, they have to fill this out. You'll put this in with your listing. You'll just fill out the seller and the property type, and then whether or not they have knowledge or no knowledge of lead-based paint. Most of the time, they do not have any knowledge of lead-based paint in their property. And then you have them sign it. The way I learned was you have them sign it, you have them initial page 1, and you have them initial page 2. But technically, you can just have them sign it, and then when the buyer signs it, then they can initial and acknowledge the buyer's request to either waive it or accept an opportunity to have a lead-based paint thing. And that's actually brilliant. I never learned that way. I learned to have seller sign, initial, everything. But you can do it however you want.
I was wondering why I'd seen so many lately that were done that way. I was like, why not just have everybody sign everything? But that makes sense the way.
Yeah. Yeah, because once your seller fills this out, if they sign everything, the seller really never gets this again. The buyer's agent will fill out the buyer's name on the top and have the buyer sign. But then it doesn't ever really show that your seller acknowledged what they were going to do. And there's a few agents in our office that always mark they're accepting an opportunity to have a lead-based paint inspection. And, you know, it would be nice maybe to have the seller date it and acknowledge that they know that. So I'm kind of a fan of leaving these not marked until you actually get an offer and get this filled back from the buyer's agent. Like we talked about before, the legal description you'll need, and the plat is a really nice thing to put in the listing as well. It's not absolutely required, but I usually stick my legal description initialed by the seller and my plat map, and I'll just upload them together so that you have that. And then last but not least is the seller's disclosure form, which is a lot of questions, and your seller has to fill this out. You're not even supposed to write their name on it. You're supposed to keep your hands off of this 100%. I have so many clients that will say, will you just sit down with us and fill it out right now? And I do, but you know, they're really supposed to fill this out because this gives any information on the property, and you don't want to have them say, well, my agent filled that out, because this could take you to court someday down the road, and they're going to use this document. And if your handwriting's all over it, they're going to be like, why is your handwriting on here? Why did you do that? Right?
Well, and one of the things that is always good to remind people that are filling this out, because it can be a little stressful. It's a pretty difficult form to fill out. They need to mark every single line, and don't know or not applicable are completely acceptable answers. If you do not know or it does not apply to your house, then that is totally fine. But every line needs to have a check mark. Or
absolutely
complete then, and then that can invalidate your contract actually completely. According to Annie Fitzsimmons, if you do not have a completed seller's disclosure, technically they have an argument that you don't have a legal binding contract.
Yeah, there you go. And you know, once the buyer signs off on it, they sign off on it. But like I always tell my sellers, you're filling this out to the best of your knowledge. If you don't know, like Corey said, you don't know. Don't try to make it up. Well, is there fill dirt on your material on your property? No. Okay, well, the house is like my house is 80 years old. How do I know what the heck is out there? I mean, so to me, I just feel like if you don't know, say don't know. Because you don't know. Has your house been used as an illegal drug manufacturing? Now, could be since you've owned it, but these things will go with you, you know? Are there any buried underground tanks? No, there's not. Well, yeah, I have an oil tank in my driveway, right? It was here when I moved in. They didn't disclose. I have one out by my pool. They never told me there was one out there. When I bought the house, it said there wasn't any. So, just be super careful. They said no. They should have said they don't know, or they should have said, yeah, there is one. But yeah, Corey's right. Fill it out to the best of your knowledge and fill out every line.
And there are a few questions on there where you'll get a question from your seller. If I took care of it, do I still need to check the box? You'll get that question a lot. And it depends. You have to read the question. There is a question on there that says, has the roof leaked in the last 5 years? If it has leaked in the last 5 years, it doesn't matter if they had it fixed. It doesn't matter if they had a new roof put on. It doesn't matter. The answer is yes. Has it leaked in the last 5 years? Yes. Right? It does not
Yeah.
matter if they fixed it. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
and then they can put a note on there right at the end that says we replaced the roof 3 years ago.
Exactly.
So, but it still leaked, right?
exactly. So you always have the room to put an explanation. You can always attach additional pages of explanation if you need to, including like maybe even the invoice from the contractor or anything like that. You can attach all those supporting documents. Exactly. If you check yes to any asterisk item, you have to give that additional explanation. And please do that and make sure that they're reading the question appropriately and they're answering it honestly, because they will ask you. And usually if they're asking you, it means that it probably is.
Right? Yeah, something's up.
And once you know, it has to be disclosed.
That's right. And you know that you technically on this seller's disclosure, a lot of times when you go and you're writing an offer and you're competing and you're in a hurry, this disclosure statement, by not having this signed and presenting an offer, like when you're competing, this doesn't do you any favors because until the buyer signs this, they can rescind their offer. They can rescind their offer if they don't sign the seller's disclosure. So if you're competing with 5 other people and your buyer doesn't sign this form and you submit the offer, this is kind of that's kind of a ding against your buyer, because knowing that they could tell 4 other people, we're going to take this offer, and then your buyer could come back in 3 days and go, yeah, I've changed my mind. So it's important to get people to sign this as soon as you possibly can. And if it's not in the documents on Flex, then text the agent and say, I need that disclosure statement, right?
And remember, it's not part of the purchase and sale agreement, too.
Right.
So it does not need to go to the lender. In fact, not only does it not need to go to the lender, you're doing your client a disservice if you send it to the lender. Please don't do that. And it's also not part of the purchase and sale. So they are not terms that are agreed to between the buyer and seller. It is simply that, a disclosure. You'll notice at the top, it does not say this is part of agreement dated such and
right.
such. That's how you know it is not part of the purchase and sale agreement. So anything on here, if they say, oh, I'm selling as is, or I don't agree to make repairs or anything like that, that is actually not a term in the contract just because they put it in the seller's disclosure. And it's important to know whether or not your client has to do a seller's disclosure to the best of their ability. There are a lot of agents in town who believe if they've never lived in the property, they do not need to do a seller's disclosure. That is not true. That is not true. There is one party that is exempt from doing a seller's disclosure, and that is an estate, and only an estate, not a trust, an estate. So if you have someone who is selling a property that they only had as an investment, that's fine. They check the box saying that they didn't live in the property, and they can put don't know or not applicable on everything in there. That's fine, but they still have to fill it out. And there's a lot of agents in town who will push back really, really hard on that. And the important thing to remember for you is I did a whole class with Annie Fitzsimmons on this. It was one of my favorite classes. Is technically, if they don't fill it out, you don't have that legally binding agreement, especially if you don't do the right waiver the right to receive the completed seller's disclosure. If you never waive that right, and you get to the end of 3 days before closing, you technically can back out, and they would technically be entitled to their earnest money being returned because the seller never filled it out.
Right.
And they're not in those exempt classes. So it is technically something you can do in your back pocket, but that doesn't mean the seller wouldn't fight you for your earnest money. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be ugly. It doesn't mean any of those things. So make sure if you're the listing agent, you just explain to the seller, yes, I know you didn't live here. You can put don't know if you don't know, or if you're a landlord, you should know quite a few of those things.
Yes.
Right? You should know the age of the home that was built. I mean, you're putting it in the listing agreement.
Right.
You should know that.
Right. Do you have a
So-
legal authority to sell the property? I mean, yeah, some of these are super basic. I just had two this month where they're like, the seller, well, one was a FISBO and then the other one was not. And they're like, they won't give us the seller's disclosure. They won't give us the seller's disclosure. And I'm like, okay, we are going to try up until the day of closing to get that seller's disclosure. But if we don't, then I will have them take a blank seller's disclosure. I have them put the address on it, and then I would have them sign number 3. Buyer's been advised of buyer's right to receive a completed seller's disclosure. Buyer waives that right. However, if the answer to any of the questions in the section entitled environmental would be yes, buyer may not waive the receipt of environmental section. So at least it protects for them. It protects us for our file because we have something in the file saying, hey, you know, we tried and they did not provide.
I love that you're saying up until closing, keep trying to get it, keep trying to get it. You'll have all those communications and then you're doing it at the last minute. I love that, Cami. Not just doing it right away.
Oh gosh, no. When they're like, I've asked 3 times, I'm like, who is it? And then I get on them and then I call their DB and I say, look, we need to have this form. And most of the time we get them. I've only had twice maybe in the last 3 years where we absolutely could not get one. And we just made notes all over in our file. We put in copies of the emails where we requested them over and over and over again and closed the file out. So yeah, so that's super duper important. But yeah, so I know that like the agency disclosure is not required in every office's folders, but I really love that form. And I also really love the FERPTA. I think it's super important to have that in there. And I hope that helped you guys a little bit. I'm going to quit sharing my screen because I can't stand not seeing you guys.
I've never had a seller who hasn't been willing to fill out the FERPTA. If I send a blank FERPTA with my offer and leave line 14 of page 1 blank, I've never had it where they're like, we refuse to disclose whether or not, you know, I've never had it happen. If I send it blank with an offer, they'll fill it out and send it back. Sometimes it's late. Sometimes it's not with the original offer, but they'll always do it before closing. I feel better about it if I have that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And if you're representing for sale by owner, sadly, you're going to have to haul all those forms over there and have that seller fill all those out, the lead, the sellers, the agency, the FERP, I mean, everything. But it protects you. So, and that's what we're hearing, right? When I decided to take on this job as DB, I went up and met with the DB up in Spokane, Ken Sachs, and I sat down with him and he's like, well, what do you want to do? Or what you need to know? And I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. And he goes, cover your ass, cover your ass. And we laughed so hard. I'm like, okay. And he's like, whatever you do, just cover your butt all the time. So when I am asking for these things from you guys and complete listings to be filled out and this and that, the other thing, I know I am a little picky, but this is all to protect you guys and us. If somebody, because sometimes people flip and they get weird, right? And they, you know, will turn on you. You think you have a great relationship and next thing you know, they're like throwing you under the bus. So as long as we technically have all of our bases covered, we're good. So I know we ran out of time, but we'll do another one of these next month. And I want to go over next month. I want to do some things like the escalation addendum, the evidence of funds addendum. There's a few different forms that I think we're kind of using a lot right now. And Corey, that force majeure form right now, we should not be using that anymore. So
I don't know anybody who is using that.
I think I saw Brad just write an offer with one the other day. So
contracts or anything.
Okay. So just FYI. Yeah.
I don't think I think I remember we were about 2 weeks into using that when you got word that like, hey, not even necessary anymore. Because really right now, nothing's being delayed enough to where it's a problem. Although we've had 2 coaching appraisals in the last few weeks, been 7-week appraisal and an 8-week appraisal. So make sure you're talking to your lenders before you submit an offer.
Yeah.
That's not force majeure if you could have known ahead of time.
That's right. That has nothing to do with it. But my next appointment is here, so I gotta go. But thank you guys so much. If you have any other questions, just email, text me, okay?
Thank you so much.
Bye.